Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of the Dolphins Make Me Cry podcast. I'm your host, Steve Giordano, and we finally, after about 6 months of no football, talking about off-season stuff, talking about money, mini camps, training camps, Tua's contract, all these crazy things that have, no direct results on the field. We finally got preseason week 1 with the Dolphins getting a victory 20-13 over the Atlanta Falcons at Hard Rock Stadium. And I'm just going to start here to kind of talk whole NFL when it comes to preseason football. So as a season ticket holder for, at this point, about 10 years, we are forced to pay for preseason games with the same cost pretty much as what the regular season costs. And you're basically forced into this paying for 10 games. And there's been a lot of speculation around the NFL going to an 18-game schedule. And what they would end up doing is they would go from the 3 preseason games and 17 regular season to 2 1-1 home and away preseason games, and then an 18-game schedule. And dear Lord, can we please make this happen, because preseason football is beyond terrible. It's almost like one of those things you're like excited to go because, oh, hey, we haven't seen football in 6-7 months. And then you get there and you're like, yeah, no starters are playing and the back end of the roster is in there. And it's basically guys that are scratching and fighting and clawing to make the roster. And the reality is, like, most teams kind of know of a 53-man roster when you're cutting it from 90. Most teams kind of know 47 of the guys that are making the team. And then there's like that 5 to 6 that are on the bubble and who's going on the practice squad. So we basically go and watch these games to see, the back end of the roster, who's going to make it. And it's kind of beyond dumb. So I'm hoping and praying that we can get an 18-game schedule. I don't know, next year, you got a lot when it comes to collective bargaining and, the concessions that the players are going to have to make. And at the end of the day, like anything else in business, it's going to come down to money. So I'm sure what we'll be looking at, hopefully, will be 18 regular season games, 2 preseason games, like I said, home and away, and then lots of concessions around money. And then there's been some speculation and talk around 2 bye weeks and then kind of pushing the Super Bowl to that President's Day weekend, which really should be anyway, because then you'd have basically the whole weekend and the Monday off. So hopefully Roger Goodell is listening. And if he's not, he should subscribe to the Dolphins Make Me Cry podcast immediately so we can get this going. Now that I've went off on my rant on preseason football, we had a preseason football game, like I said, and, it was kind of what you would expect. I thought there were some, I guess we'll start with the good. There's some good, and I'm going to start defensively. You can kind of see a little bit of the Anthony Weaver defensive scheme, and I'd even go a little further in saying the defensive personality that he wants the team to take on. He's a former player, hard-nosed type of a coach. He ran, the defense in Baltimore. And, one thing that you think about with the Ravens, and can't stand them but got to give them credit, is they are a physical bunch, and they're going to smack you in the mouth, and they're going to make you, kind of feel the pain, as they say. And I think you're starting to formulate that attitude in the defense. You could kind of see it last night in the game. Most starters did not play, obviously, but you definitely had guys flying around. You had guys making plays. You had a lot of the rookies kind of getting their feet wet and doing some pretty good things. And, in preseason games, Atlanta went for it on a couple of 4th downs as they were driving to score. Obviously, some of those things wouldn't happen in the regular season. Dolphins made some pretty big stops. They come up with a nice fumble in the first quarter, fumble recovery. Neal from the Bills, who I think is going to be a very kind of unsung hero type of a player, contributing on special teams and contributing defensively. But you could kind of see that thought process. And in preseason games, you're not necessarily seeing the full scheme, as they say, but you're seeing this mentality of physicality. And it's what I've been screaming for. I said it last week. It's what I'm going to continue to scream for. They have to become the bullies. And what's been interesting is in training camp the last week, Jalen Ramsey has kind of taken this on. And he's been very vocal in the media and to the team around the fact that the perception of the Miami Dolphins right now, and it's been for a long time, has been they're soft. They're just not a hard-nosed bunch. And back in the day, in the heyday, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, early 2000s, they were known for being a hard-nosed type of a bunch, and then it just kind of, I don't know why, just a soft mentality. In my opinion, it's kind of come upon them, and they're trying to get rid of it. And last year, when you look at the success really they've had the last 2 years, it's been centered around, hey, we have this high-flying speed type of a team, but if you punch them in the mouth and you kind of knock them off the track, like a great track team, when you do that, you're gonna knock them out for good because they're not gonna be able to give you that counter punch. So I think what they're trying to do here, schematically and from a mentality perspective, is change that perception around the league. And Jalen Ramsey's been talking about being the bully, being the bully. They had 2 joint practices this past week with Atlanta, which from all accounts, the Dolphins, kind of came out ahead, particularly defensively, where they were kind of flying around and making plays and just being the bully and being physical. And you kind of saw it in the game on Friday night where they're doing some good things. I mean, you had, guys like Channing Tindall, who's been like, a guy who's been here, it seems like forever, and he's really never broken through. He's probably not going to, make this massive impact on the team. He might not even make the roster, but you could kind of see a different player. You got guys out there, rookies like Storm Duck, crazy name, but, seems like a type of a player that, you might, get some contribution from a special teams perspective, and then you kind of see how he evolves as a rookie. But you could see some different things in just the way they went about the game from a defensive perspective. It'll be very interesting to see, and it's going to be kind of wild how they handle things from a special teams perspective. I've been very critical, and I will continue to be critical until they change my mind about how they manage special teams. A little bit better last night, did some decent things. And obviously you have this new wild kickoff rule, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they manage it and what are the teams and the coaches that kind of learn it and implement it. And are they attacking it, or are they just going to be the ones that kick the ball out of bounds to where they're not, putting themselves at risk? But somebody's going to figure it out to where they're going to make it work for their advantage. And one of the key things in these preseason games is you kind of start to formulate the guys who are going to be versatile enough to play special teams and to contribute on special teams. And I've said it a lot. I know it's not sexy to talk special teams, especially in the world of fantasy, and hence why I've probably never done fantasy, because I'm more about the wins and losses and the nuance of the game. For me, fantasy is about offense and a little bit about defense, right? But at the end of the day, all these little things, special teams, setting your offense up for success, putting them in good field position, not being a detriment, it's almost like there's 3 types of special teams, right? You have the teams that are really good at it and they're solid and foundational. Then you just get by with it. And then you have the teams that are just god awful. Like, frankly, we were in the middle last year of god awful to getting by. And it's something that this year has to change. And you could kind of see some things last night in the way they're formulating it. Jason Sanders obviously played, boomed a 58-yard field goal, missed a 58-yard field goal. Obviously, they're trying to get him in the mix and just, try to get him to be the good Jason Sanders as he has been in years past. It's kind of like every other year he's either really good or really decent. So it was good to kind of, get some good kicks under his belt. Not that I want to sit here all day and talk about, the kicking and punting game, but I think it's going to be of importance for this year. So the offense, couple of good things you saw. Jalen Wright, definitely can see why they drafted him as a rookie running back, and that I really believe the running back room can really make a huge difference for them. It's going to be really key on how they manage the entire roster, how many they keep. You know, you have obviously Raheem Mostert. You're going to have Jalen Wright. You're going to have A-Chain. That's 3 right there. You got Brooks, who last year had a phenomenal camp, and then he comes in, and he was kind of an odd man out, got hurt, and then by the time he came back, the room was just too filled, and obviously A-Chain had the success that he had. Then you have Wilson, who kind of another unsung guy, got hurt at the beginning of the year last year. Again, by the time he came back, the room was just full. They're probably going to have to cut one of these guys or trade one of these guys. Maybe Jeff Wilson does enough in this preseason where you feel good about the rest of the guys and you trade them, or you can get something for them. But you definitely have a lot of running backs. And I think the key to the success for this team is going to be how they manage, obviously this lightning fast speed and this passing game, but how they truly commit to the run, particularly in the moments when they need it most, 3rd and short, and at inopportune times of the game. And will Mike McDaniel be able to run up the middle and not rely so heavily as they are such an outside zone type of a running team? So it's going to be very key in my opinion. But I think you have the pieces in all these running backs. And even though they're all very fast, I think you have some different elements to some of them. Brooks has a physicality behind him, which I think is good. Obviously, you also have Ingold as a fullback who can do some interesting things for you. But if I'm them, I don't want to say, the old way of run to set up the pass, but I kind of do want to say run to set up the pass. It's different than it used to be years ago because it's obviously a passing league, but you need to be able to run the ball kind of when you want to run the ball and then also at the opportunistic times. Stats are very deceiving. They had one of the top 3 rushing offenses last year. It kind of dipped off a little bit towards the end of the year. But when you really go back and you watch the games, and if you're a diehard fan like myself, you're going to look at it and say, all right, you had some games where you had some massive runs and some, big, hits here and there from the run game. But when it came down to it on 3rd and 1, you just were piss poor. And you need to be able to line up on a 3rd and 1 and be able to barrel through somebody and run them over to get a first down. And what I'm hoping they embrace, and the jury will be out on it until I see it, is that run game, if you really break it down, it doesn't get the credit. That's Tua's best friend, and it also was probably a big reason why Tua was so effective. And it's not anything against him. Anybody in this league, I don't care who you are in the history of the game, people don't talk about Tom Brady's the run games that he had. But the fact of the matter is he had, not that he had flashy running backs, but in all the years that he was successful, he had a solid run game, usually by committee. But when the Patriots wanted to hand the ball off and, put their foot in the dirt and get a 5-yard gain or get a 3rd and 1 or a 3rd and 2, they did it. And guess what? That opened things up. Defense had to respect it. They bring guys to the line of scrimmage. They're bringing in safeties. And the next thing you know, that's where Brady would go to work, one-on-ones, quick slants, all the different things that he did. I'll have nightmares if I rehash it, but got to give him credit where it's due. That's what the Dolphins need to do with Tua. It's 100% the way that they can get this offense moving. The other thing last night that was interesting, talking about getting the offense moving, the tight end position. So last year, mentioned it last week, they had not one touchdown, the only team in the league from the tight end position, which is honestly like comical. How it's even possible. They should win an award for that. And you saw what they did in the offseason with tight ends. And now you get Tanner Conner, a guy who, he's been here a few years, had some concussion issues, had some, injuries. He's kind of got that, prototypical body type that you want in a tight end. And he made some big plays last night. Again, you take all these things with a grain of salt. You're playing 2nd and 3rd string, so it is somewhat hard to gauge. However, when you break it down, when we're talking about him and Smythe and Giordano Smith and what they've kind of done in bringing tight ends in. And in fairness, in camp and all reports, the tight ends have not really stood out. You're hoping here that, not to say that that position is going to be on fire like a Rob Gronkowski would be, but you're hoping that they can actually get some legitimate threat from that position, which really just opens everything up because you can take advantage of the middle of the field. And when you think history of the Dolphins, in all the years they've been pretty much mediocre, they've had tight ends kill them. They've literally for years not been able to cover tight ends, and these teams have picked them apart. It's time for us to start doing that. We need a tight end. All these guys, Smythe, Tanner Connor, Giordano Smith, we need these guys to own the middle of the field. And it's not to say these guys are going to, light the world on fire and, have a million catches, but we need opportunistic catches at the right times, right down the seam, middle of the field, and in the red zone. That is going to open so much stuff up where then it's just a juggernaut because you can't go and double Tyreek and Waddle and be watching the tight end and then boom, the tight end's wide open, or Ingold, the fullback's wide open. So I'm really hoping, and you started to see it last night with how you think they're going to try to work that tight end, and hopefully we're just seeing that full evolution of the offense and this team, which I think is going to help them, really take it to the next level this year and do a lot of the things that they need to do. Really liked what I saw out of Patrick Paul, the tackle that they drafted, who essentially, it's kind of like one of those, he's going to sit behind the learning tree this year. But as it goes, people get hurt, as last night, unfortunately, offensive lineman Keon Smith out for the year, torn ACL. Probably wasn't going to be a starter, but was definitely going to be in the mix of a rotation. So totally sucks, going back to why preseason games are annoying, because these guys get hurt for no good reason, apparently. And sucks that he's out for the year. But when you look at like a Patrick Paul, you could see some dominant plays from him. And you could definitely see the size that he has. He's raw. It's probably going to be a redshirt type of year for him. And you pray that, the guys on the line can stay healthy and he won't have to play too much. But we know the game. These guys, they get hurt. And you have to have that depth on the line. But you like seeing what you saw out of him because you're like, man, like if that guy can put it all together, physically he fits the bill of what you definitely need in a tackle. So hoping that can, kind of come to fruition as time goes on, and, hoping he can contribute if need be in spot starts if he needs to get in there this year, which I'm sure he will. Going to the offensive line in general, again, not the most sexy thing to talk about, but when you look at the line, I'm a little uneasy about it, I'll be honest. I think last year, Butch Barry did a great job coaching them up. He deserves a hell of a lot of credit because the last 2 years, they've really had the best probably line play that they've had in, 15 years. Now, that's not saying too much because the 15 years, they've had some pretty shitty line play. But they were pretty efficient last year, outside if you take out the end of the year where they faced a lot of injuries. But little bit of smoke and mirrors because of the structure of the offense, the quick strikes, getting the ball out. It's almost like part of the offensive structure is to Band-Aid what they know the offensive line can't do. So the worry you have is, to me, is they really don't have a backup center per se out of, Liam Eichenberg. They've kind of moved him around. And, in fairness to him, he's a decent player. You wish you'd get more out of him from where he was picked. I do think as time goes on, he'll probably make a turn this year because he's a pretty smart Notre Dame, player. But he really needs to settle into the position. And Aaron Brewer this week, the center that they signed from the Titans, he hurt his hand. And really, you don't have any real proven centers on the team. You have a couple guys that you can move in there, a few of which might not even be on the roster. But then it becomes, okay, if Brewer gets hurt, what do you do? Is it Eichenberg going there? Probably. But then what are you then doing at guard? And then you're also not giving Eichenberg kind of the set position that he really deserves at this point. So it's going to be very interesting with the offensive line. They don't seem, as an organization, to worry about it, which always worries the shit out of me because I feel like they undervalue what the offensive line does. At the end of the day, if you can't block anybody, you're just dead man walking. You could have the best quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end in the history of football, but if you can't block, you got problems. So a couple other quick things from last night. I would say this, and again, the quarterbacks. We're gonna end it on the quarterbacks. Most teams, if their starter goes down, they're kind of shit out of luck, right? And I don't want to say the season's over, but the season's over. Okay. Mike White, Skylar Thompson. In fairness, they're not working with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, the whole cast of characters, the top, A-plus offensive line. They're just not, okay? But I'll say this. If I'm the Dolphins and I kind of change my mind on this, I might put in a call to Ryan Tannehill. I don't think they'll ever do that because I don't think that they will want to ever have any type of competition where Tua would feel threatened, which he wouldn't be anyway, but be that as it may. The thing this Dolphins franchise has done a terrible job of is quarterback play since Dan Marino, as we know, has been piss poor. And now you have the best quarterback that you've had since Marino. But if he gets hurt, which he has an injury history, he played 17 games last year, you pray this year he does the same, you need to be able to go into games and say, all right, if he gets hurt with a hand injury and he's out a week or two, this guy can come in, back up, he can run the offense, he can keep it efficient, and he can keep us in games, and all right, maybe we can pull one out, win 1 out of 2. I don't have that confidence with Mike White or Skylar Thompson. I don't. Skylar Thompson is now in year 3. He played a playoff game. He middling at best, plays hard, kind of a gunslinger. Obviously, he's been in the offense, but he ain't scaring nobody. He's just not. Mike White, he was a good little story on the Jets. Obviously, he didn't play that much last year. He played in garbage time when we had a lot of leads. He's kind of a big dude, so the quick pass strike ability in the offense, it's a little bit off. And it's not to say that Tannehill would come in here and, be the fit for the offense, because he honestly wouldn't be what his style is. But if I'm looking at this, I'd say, and again, money's another factor, I might make the call. It's probably not going to happen. They're probably going to go into it and say, the other factor is obviously money. We're paying Mike White $4 million. We've had Skylar Thompson here for 3 years. It is what it is. And again, it's preseason game 1, but I don't have a lot of confidence in either one of those guys. I almost look at both of them and I'd say they could be my third string, but I'd like a number 2. Particularly when we're looking at this team and we're saying, okay, we know we're in the run of we'll call it 2 to 3 year run to legitimately be a playoff and Super Bowl contender. And look, Ryan Tannehill, he's a decent little quarterback and he's had a decent little career and he did some decent things here. He obviously wasn't the guy long-term. He went to Tennessee. They completely set him up for success with a running game and a defense, and he didn't have to do too much, but he did enough. And he almost led them to the, AFC Championship Super Bowl. I might make that call because at least he's got some experience. He knows the area. He knows the team. He knows the expectations. I'd make the call because if I'm looking at the league, look, most people don't have, good, competent backups, but I would be very concerned if something were to happen to Tua. You could just basically say you're shit out of luck because I don't know if either one of those guys are winning a game and holding the fort down. And when you're going to sit here with a talented team and a talented roster like you have, and you're going to sit there and go into it with Mike White or Skylar Thompson, I'm sorry, bro. Like, it ain't working for me. Not with the amount of money you got on this roster. It would essentially be a crime if that were to happen. So hopefully they're monitoring it. We're going to see how it goes in now week 2 of the preseason. Dolphins take on the Commanders, and it'll be interesting to see if they do play Tua or starters. I'm going to venture to guess they probably won't. I mean, maybe. But, McDaniel is all about, safety and longevity and December and all that good stuff. So we'll see. But, again, Dolphin victory. Week 1 of the preseason. We're gearing up for the regular season. I'm really trying to get myself like crazy excited, even though I'm really beat down from last year and still not over it. But, we all start at 0-0, and we have all the opportunity in the world in front of us. So we will see you next week as we go through week 2 of the preseason and we creep up to the regular season. And let's bring it on. Let's go Dolphins. We'll see you next week.